Good afternoon. My name is Dirk. Thank you for joining our live interactive telephone town hall. This is an interactive forum, and we would love to hear from you. We'll be taking as many questions from participants as we possibly can live on this event. If you have a question, you can press *3 on your phone keypad at any time. You'll be placed in line to speak with a member of our staff. They will take down your name and where you're calling from. The next time you hear your name, you will be live on the call and able to ask your question directly. If you are streaming the event on our website, you can simply type your name and question below the streaming player. We'll do our best to answer as many questions as we possibly can this afternoon. And now, here is United Cooperative Services General Manager and CEO, Cameron Smallwood.
Hey, thanks, Dirk, and good afternoon, everyone. This is Cameron Smallwood. Thank you for joining us today. As a lot of you know, we engage our members in many ways, including through community meetings, our annual meeting each October, our Texas Co-op Power Magazine, social media, and just daily interactions, just to name a few different ways. We recently launched our Power Talk podcast, which can be accessed on your favorite podcast listening app, including Apple, Spotify, and Amazon. Today, we are once again leveraging this telephone town hall platform to engage our members. We've heard from many of you during the first couple of months with questionings about a number of items, and I'm going to provide you a number of items and things to consider as we go forward in 2026. So thanks again for joining us today, and look forward to having the discussion.
Now, as I mentioned earlier, everyone, this is an interactive forum, and we would love to hear from you. So we'll be taking as many questions from participants on the phone and from online as we possibly can live on this event. So if you have a question, please press *3 on your telephone keypad at any time. You'll be placed in line to speak with a member of our staff. They'll take down your name and where you're calling from. Then the next time you hear your name, you're going to be live on this call and able to ask your question directly. Remember, if you're streaming the event online, you can simply type your name and question right below the streaming player. We'll do our best to answer as many questions as we possibly can. But if we're not able to address your question today, please leave us a voicemail after the event by simply remaining on the line and listen for the tone. Then leave us your name and your question. Or you can call our office during business hours at 817-556-4000. That number again, 817-556-4000. Also, remember, if you have a question during this event, we'd love to have you ask it live on the event by pressing *3 to enter the question queue, or you can type your name and question right below the streaming player. Cameron, I'll hand it back to you, sir.
Thanks, sir. Well, we'll get started and jump right in. And as I mentioned a bit ago, we've had a number of questions over the last couple of months. And, as we go forward in time, I know there's going to be questions going forward on a lot of different topics. I'm going to try to cover a number of updates for you today. But I'm going to jump in and talk about sort of stability that we provide you as your electric cooperative. And so what you expect out of us is to keep rates stable and reasonable and affordable, and we do our best to do that at your cooperative. And I've got, for those that are watching or looking at the slides and connected online, I've got a handful of slides with some data to show you, but that's not necessary in order to participate with our call today, because I'm going to describe those situations and things with you as well. So that'll be good. I think everybody will be able to follow along just fine, whether or not you're looking at the slides today that we have on task, if you will. So the first one I want to talk about, and the thing I want to talk about is stability. And so we've got to go back to sort of Winter Storm Uri. If you look at our past prices over time, or past rates, you'll know that we used to be lower than we are right now. But that's not unique to United. The whole market used to be cheaper here in Texas compared to what it is today. And I know a lot of our members remember that. It wasn't that long ago that we went through February 21, and everything shifted after that point in time. But prior to that point in time, we still had ups and downs in our rates over time, and a lot of different reasons for that. No reason to really go back that far in history to talk about it. Really what we're going to talk about is where we're at today and how we got to where we're at today. But after Winter Storm Uri, what we saw in the market is prices generally shot up all across the board. And that's not just because of Winter Storm Uri. We had a period of inflation there too. And that wasn't just in Texas either. That's national. And so what I'm talking from today is something that folks all across the U.S. have experienced in their electric rates. Back then, we were about 10 cents a kilowatt hour prior to Winter Storm Uri. And prices today, if you watch our co-op power, we put it in the magazine every month, you'll see we're just under 14 cents a kilowatt hour for that 2,000 kilowatt hours of usage. So that's a little bit of an increase from that time. And what is driving that? Obviously, inflation is a piece, but another piece is just the market design in general has changed. And obviously, we all want to have a reliable system, and so some things have changed in the rules of ERCOT that have caused additional costs. But in the end, we've gone through several storms, nothing like Winter Storm Uri, but we have gone through some challenges, and the grid has remained stable during that time, which is a benefit to all Texans. I will say Winter Storm Uri did cause us some challenges because our power supplier at the time, Brazos Electric, did have some challenges with some of their plants and ended up having to buy some really high-priced energy during that time, which forced it into bankruptcy, which we had to deal with as one of its owners. And as we were going through that process, we made a decision through the bankruptcy process to no longer buy our power through Brazos, which was a really big change for us, but ultimately has been a really big benefit to the members as far as stability as we've gone forward. So from March 23, when we first started being responsible for purchasing your energy for you, and that's what we've done ever since then, our rate has pretty much stayed stable. And that's a really good thing for our members. Prior to that point, we were a little bit lower, but it did bounce around some. So when Brazos was buying our energy, we saw some volatility, just like the rest of the market did. But as we moved into procuring the energy for you, what you'll see on the graph, but I can explain to you, it's been a pretty much a flat rate ever since then, with some pretty minor increases and pretty small decreases over that time. So if you look at our cost for 2,000 kilowatt hours, it's pretty much stayed the same since March of 2023. And so stability has been the name of the game, and I think a lot of our members have appreciated that over time. And I look forward to having the discussion. But if you look at the chart before we move on to my next topic, you'll see some little tiny bumps in that flat line. It looks pretty flat, but there's some tiny bumps. The first one, January 24, we had a small decrease in our power costs because of our contracted with Constellation. So that brought our costs down. In November 24, there's a small bump up, and that was when we implemented our distribution rate increase for the co-op. And then a month or 2 months later, you see a small decrease, and that's when the next adjustment happened in our Constellation contract. And then in January, a few months back, you saw another drop down. And ultimately, we're right back down to where we were in May and March of 23. So we've maintained stability through that time. And we have on the chart, we show the Encore REP average, and we show the Texas, New Mexico REP average. And during that time, they have fluctuated, and we have stayed pretty flat. And during most of that time, we have been cheaper than both of those rates. And so that's been a benefit to our members as well. Moving to the total cost of electric service. And so I want to talk about that a little bit. We basically have expenses, and then you pay us, and all that balances out at the end of the year. And we call that total cost of electric service. So how much that we have to pay for and then bill back to you. And in 2020, that number was a little under $200 million. In 2025, in comparison, that number is about $390 million. So a pretty big increase of total cost of electric service from 2020 to 2025. Now, what's driving that? One, we're bigger. We've grown quite a bit. So as we grow and we have more members to serve and more meters to serve and more plants to build, the cost of that goes up over time. But when we compare sort of the breakdown of those costs between 2020 and 2025, there's not a significant difference, which means the cost of electric service has increased over all the different categories that I'm about to talk to you about here in a bit. And so that tells you it's not any one thing that's increased our electric service costs. It's all things. And so inflation, wage inflation, parts and pieces, vehicles, the same things that you're dealing with as members we've dealt with as a company, as your cooperative. And then there's some other trends that have happened that have affected cost as well. So I'm going to talk about those things. But generally, your bill is broken up into two components. One component, what we call power cost, and that includes a number of things. And for those of you that can see the slide, that's everything that's in the blue shades. And then the other component is what we call the distribution side, and that's the part of the bill that actually comes and funds your electric cooperative specifically. Now, on the power supply component of your bill, all of that cost that we pay for is transferred to our members with no markup. So whatever we pay, we just have to recover that dollar for dollar from our members so that we don't mark that up at all. The other part of the bill, which is green on the graph, is our distribution component, and that's where we make our margins, and our margins are just what we have to make above our cost in order to keep our bankers happy. And it's not a lot of money, but it's enough to keep the banks happy. And ultimately, any margin that we make, because we're a not-for-profit electric cooperative, actually has to, by law, come back to our members. And so ultimately, if we make margins, which we do every year, we have to actually put that into accounts based on how much each of our members use. And then every year, our board has to determine how much of that we can retire back to our members in cash, which is your member dividend. And we have a long history of providing that cash back to our members. And we're going to continue to do that going forward because that's the cooperative business model. So with that said, the breakdown of the bill is about 75% of power supply costs and about 25% distribution costs. So that's about the breakdown. And so what that tells you is the majority of your bill, three quarters of it, is cost that's just passed along to you without any markup. And so we do our best to manage those different components to the best of our ability. And I want to talk to you now sort of about what those components are and what we can control and what we can't control. So we're going to start with the biggest portion of your bill, and that's the energy portion. And back in 2020, it's the same in 2025, about 53% of the cost of electric service was energy. And so that's basically the cost of getting that energy for you that you use at your home and businesses each and every day. And so how that works today is we have contracts, multiple contracts that we work. We work with Constellation still, but we also get energy from other entities and also from the market itself. And then we're doing things to try to manage that as we go forward. And so that's about 53% of the cost of service. The next bucket in that power supply is transmission costs. So almost 10% of your electric cost of service is derived from the transmission cost. So there's a transmission grid out there that crosses Texas, and everybody has to pay their part of that. And about 10% of your billing goes to pay for the transmission investment out in the ERCOT grid. The next is the securitization bucket, and so it's about 8% of the total cost of electric service today. Now, that didn't exist in 2020, but it does exist in 2025, and it has since we exited the bankruptcy. And basically what that is we had to borrow money to pay for our part of the energy used during Winter Storm Uri. So that was never billed to our members. We actually held that back, and through the bankruptcy process, we were able to borrow money and put that collection out over a long period of time. And so what that amounts to today is about a penny per kilowatt hour on your bill. And over time, as we continue to grow and sell more kilowatt hours, that gets spread over those kilowatt hours, and we expect that cost to go down over time. And so that's the last piece of the power supply bucket is the substation cost. It's the smallest piece. It's about 2% of our electric cost of service, and that basically keeps the substations that we need to take from the transmission system and convert that to the lines that we build for your homes and businesses each day. Now, today, Brazos Electric Cooperative still exists, and they are our transmission and substation provider. And so they bill us those costs, and we pay Brazos every month for the cost to use the transmission grid and substation costs going forward. So again, 75% of your bill is what I just discussed with you. So now I want to shift to the distribution portion of your bill. So about half of that is what we call fixed distribution costs. So that has to do with things that we really can't control all that much. The cost of debt, interest, the expenses that we have related to taxes, those things that we really don't have control over. And that's about half of that distribution expense. The other half of it is what we call controllable. But the reality is it really controllable? So about 15% of your bill, roughly 16%, is in that bucket, and that's where our margins are at as well. And so what's really controllable in that bucket? And I want to give you one of the biggest line items in that bucket that we have to pay annually, and that's the cost to trim trees and keep them away from our distribution lines. So the reality is we could probably cut there, but you're not going to be happy with the results of that because it's going to affect the reliability of the system. But that's our single largest line item in that bucket. And at the end of the day, you don't want us to cut that because then you're not going to be happy with the performance of the electric grid serving your homes and businesses, because you want the lights to be on and you want them to stay on when the storms roll through as much as possible. And cutting that budget's not going to be helpful to that cause. So while we call it controllable, it's not really fully controllable because you have expectations of reliability from us, and we want to meet those expectations as much as possible. But I do want to talk about some trends overall that might be good for us or might not be good for us as we go forward. And I'm not talking from United's perspective. I'm talking about an industry perspective here in Texas. And the first of those is what does the energy market look like as we go forward? So I already told you over 50% of the cost that we have is for the actual energy you use at your home each day. And what I'm showing on the screen for those looking at the slides is the projected growth in ERCOT over the next 5 years. And just to put it in perspective, our whole grid in ERCOT, we use about 85 gigawatts total at peak times right now in ERCOT. Over the next 5 years, all the folks that have projected adding what we call large loads to the system in ERCOT total over 400 gigawatts additional. Folks, that's almost 5 times the size of our electric grid today here in ERCOT. So that is very, very significant. And a lot of that, not all of it, but a lot of that is our data centers that want to add to the electric grid here in Texas. And so that's something we're watching very closely. I talked about the energy cost, and if you've been reading what we've been putting in Texas Co-op Power and sort of our plans to manage our energy costs going forward, we've really been working hard to drop cost out of the energy cost bucket, because that's our largest opportunity to save you money each and every day. And we've been working really hard at it, and we have saved some money for you there. And we hope in the next couple of years we're going to be able to save some more. But the headwinds of all the added growth is going to be difficult to overcome and saving you a ton of money in the energy bucket, because as more of these large loads attached to the system, whether it be a new manufacturing facility or whether it be a data center or a new industrial plant, our challenge there is the grid is going to get tighter from an energy standpoint, because we're not going to be adding enough generation to cover all that very rapidly. And so ultimately things get tight, and you understand when supply and demand get out of balance, cost tends to go up. So while we're working on ways to manage costs out of that energy bucket, we're going to have the headwind of all the load growth in ERCOT that's going to be countering that. And so our hope is at worst that we're going to be able to keep things stable, if not get costs down in that energy bucket. And so that's a challenge for us. And while I'm saying data center and talking about that word, if you will, or those words, I know we have members that are pretty concerned about what that looks like here in Johnson County and Hood County specifically. We're very aware of what's going on. We've had a number of these folks reach out to us and want to start the process of interconnection with United. I want to tell you this. From our standpoint, we have an obligation to serve anybody that requests to connect to our system in our territory. With that said, as long as they've met all the requirements of the local codes, the county requirements, the city requirements, and the state environmental requirements, if they meet all those requirements and have met the rules, we have to go through the process to interconnect them. Now, I will say we haven't interconnected a data center yet at this point. We have quite a few that would like to, and we're working through that. But ultimately, we have to make sure that we dot all our I's and cross all our T's and ensure they have met all the requirements and that we have the contracts in place and everything that's necessary to manage the risk and ensure that our members aren't paying for them to add to the system. They have to pay their way. And ultimately, that's our expectation as we go forward. So are we going to add any? I don't know the answer to that question. We're talking to quite a few, but it's happening all across America right now. It's not just in Texas. But I will say Texas is sort of going to potentially be the data center state of the future. There's a lot that want to connect in Texas, and our state government is supporting that in a big way. And so we're going to do our part to meet those expectations as we can. But ultimately, we do understand our members have concerns there, and you need to share your concerns with your local representatives and senators and your local officials. Please share your concerns. And I know many of you are, but we're working through that right now. We'll let you know as things go forward how that in future telephone town halls and community meetings, how that is progressing in the state. But right now, ERCOT has to pass some rules working with the Public Utility Commission to ensure that cost is not passed on to other consumers in the market, as well as we have to ensure that reliability is key. So we don't want to add data centers and then have another Winter Storm Uri, so to speak. So all of those rules are being developed right now, and we're paying attention to that. And we'll make sure we follow all those rules to keep the grid reliable from our perspective. And so I'm sure we may have some questions about that here in a little bit, and we'll get to those questions here pretty soon. Another item that we're watching really closely is the transmission costs. So I mentioned to you that's about 10% of your bill today. If we go back in time, and we have a chart on the screen right now, and if you look at the transmission costs that we have here at United, in 2010, we paid just over $10 million in 2010 for transmission costs. Last year, we paid almost $40 million in costs for transmission services. And so why the increase? It's part of that electric cost of service. I told you all the buckets have gone up in price, but transmission is a big part of that. And ultimately, it's because of growth, but it's also because of the transmission grid expanding. So I think all of us share the desire for the lights to stay on in those extreme scenarios when it's really hot and really cold. And because of the growth that we've had in the state, we've had to continue to add transmission to the system. And so our costs have gone up there, but we've also grown at the same time. And so, as I mentioned earlier, back in 2020, and we compare that to 2025, the transmission component of the bill was pretty similar as a percentage, but the costs have gone up quite a bit. Our concern is what's happening in the next probably 5 to 7 years in that bucket, though. And if you paid attention, I know our members are aware of this in Erath County and partly Hood County because they've been approached by Oncor on several of these new lines that are about to be built. 765,000 volt lines being built in Texas. Overall, all the West Texas lines that are supposed to come to North Texas and Central Texas, those have all been studied and approved. That's going to be about $35 billion worth of new transmission lines. And what typically happens, those initial estimates tend to go up over time. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's $40 billion or $45 billion that actually gets spent by the time it's all done. But it's expected to be somewhere in that range. And the question is, does that really lower cost? Some studies show that it could lower the energy cost over time. We don't really know the answer to that until we get there. But what I am concerned about at your co-op is how much more cost goes into that transmission bucket. Because whatever that cost is, we have to pay, and that is going to get passed on to our members. So we're watching that very closely. But I wanted you to be aware of that trend that we see coming over the next probably 5 to 7 years as those lines get built. So moving forward, we're about to go to a polling question here in a little bit, but I sort of want to close the cost discussion with, we understand the affordability challenges very well with our members right now, and we're doing everything we can in every way that we can to help you out, and we want to do that as much as we can as we go forward. So I do want to start with a polling question right now, and we're going to sort of shift to a little different topic. And so, Derek, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Cameron. As Cameron's mentioned, it is time for a polling question. All you need to do is use your telephone keypad to respond to this question. Also, if you're online, you can respond online as well. The question is, how many of y'all have had a free home energy audit performed by a United Energy expert? So if you had one done, please press 1 for yes. If you've not had an audit done, please press 2 for no. If you'd like one done, please press 3. So again, how many of y'all had a free home energy audit performed by a United Energy expert? If you've had something done, please press 1 for yes, press 2 for no, press 3 if you'd like to have one. And I see a number of people are keying in their response. Thank you very much for taking the time to respond. And Cameron, I'll hand it back to you, sir.
Hey, Dirk, thank you. And so I'll read you the results of our poll here. And so it looks about 70% of the folks responding to our poll say they have yet to have an energy audit. And so that's a pretty good opportunity for a lot of you. And I would encourage you to do so as we go forward. So, in talking about the cost and the affordability challenge, I was just reading this morning our latest survey responses. So many of you take the time, and I really appreciate you responding to our ACSI customer satisfaction emails that we send out and then giving us honest feedback in those questions. That last quarterly score was an 87, which is a really good score. And we really appreciate our members recognizing what we do for them. But I will say, the most negative comments that I saw, and there's not a lot, but there are some, is that your price is just too high. You change your rates too much. Why are your rates going up? And I see some of those comments. While I'll say it's not super common, but I'd say maybe 10% of the comments have some relation to a comment like what I just said. As I just told you and went over the data, our rates haven't changed. And so what is changing? What is changing is how much you use. And we always get the comments following the summer, and we always get the comments following the winter. And why is that? Because you use the most in the winter when your heaters are running full bore and it's cold outside, and you use the most in summer when your air conditioners are running and it's really hot outside. And so that's where the majority of our members' use comes from. We have the data to show it, and we can, if you have an energy audit, we'll actually show you the usage graph and how you use energy in those different periods and times of year. Our rates aren't changing. What's happening is, again, it's the usage that's changing. And so, yes, your bills go up when you use more, but the rate doesn't go up when you use more. It's the same rate when you're using 2,000 kilowatt hours or 5,000 kilowatt hours. And so I want to clarify that with you. What do you do about it? And that's one of the things that we really want to start working with our members on is, how can we help you use less of the product that we're selling you? And we're all about that. And, the number one first step of that is having that free energy audit. So 70% of you listening haven't had that step, and we really want to do that for you. And basically come and show you what you're using and help you understand what actually drives your energy use in your home. Education is something that we do. We're doing it right now through this town hall. This is educating our members of what drives cost. And so that's important to us, helping you evaluate the usage that you have. We have rebate programs to help pay for upgrades in your home to reduce energy use. We have grants that do the same. We have our community solar project. And that project, almost 8,000 of our members are saving money every month on their bill, being a part of that program. Right now, we have about 2,000 members that are on a waiting list wanting to get on the program, and we're hopeful to sign a contract extension here in the next month or two that's going to allow us to extend that to more members, which will be a tool for even more of you to save energy dollars. So please look forward to that. We're hopeful by the middle or late summer that we're going to have that in place and be able to add more members to that, which will save on average someone about $300 to $400 a year. So please pay attention to that. We have our thermostat program. In the summertime, if you have a Nest or Honeywell thermostat that's connected to the internet, we can connect you on that and get you some savings there. We have a Bradley's Hardship Fund for those of our members that are maybe a little lower income. you can apply for that program, and it'll pay for the securitization portion of your bill, which is not a lot of money, but it's something, and we encourage you to take advantage of that. But on solar, the community solar is one thing that we've got coming, hopefully, the extension there. We've got a contract that we're about to sign. We're working through the last legal steps of that, so that's an option for you. But about 2 years ago, we began installing solar for our members. And so if you don't want to do the community solar, but you actually want solar on your roof, we can do that too. And then we can do it in a very cost-effective manner. Now, the payback for that is probably in the 7 to 10 year mark. And so there's a little bit of time for your investment to return, but it can save cost on your energy bill if you want to work with us on that. We can help you do that. And the good news with us giving solar to you is that we're not going anywhere. We're going to be here. And so if you have an issue with it or a challenge with it, you call us. We're going to help you get it fixed and make sure your system is operating the way you want it to operate. And so that's a great benefit to you as well. We're really hopeful for those members that want to do solar that you'll reach out to us first, because our cost is pretty low for solar compared to those that are installing it in our territory. So please reach out to us if you have interest into that. Now I want to shift to one last topic before we move into the question and answer period, and that's our internet. And what we have on the screen right now is our latest ACSI score for those that are using our internet services. I want to tell you that score is the top in the country. We're well above all of our competitors. The closest competitor to us is almost 15 points below us in their ACSI score, which is just a huge difference in service. And I'm really pleased with the service level that we've been able to provide our members. I want to give you a brief story on that. Back when we started doing this service and our members asked us and actually voted for us to get into this business, about 90% of our members did not have access to high-speed internet at that point in time. We have completely flopped that. So today, because of what we've done, working with our members, over 90% of our members now have access to high-speed internet. And so we're really pleased to have flopped that whole script and be providing you a top-notch service that's tops in the country, as rewarded by you. That's not our words, that's your words. And so if you haven't used the service, reach out to us. We've covered most of our territory, not all of it, but most of it. And so if you haven't used it or didn't know that we provided it, please reach out to us and give us that opportunity to provide you that service. If you do have it, another thing that's happening is AT&T and Spectrum are actively overbuilding our fiber system right now. And they are going to our members that have switched to us and offering teaser rates to get you to switch to them. And so they want to save you $20 a month for a year or 2 years and get you to switch to them. What I would encourage you is don't fall for it, because after that time period, you're going to be paying at or more than what you're paying us right now. They're just trying to get you to shift over to them to save a little money. I know it's tempting with affordability and everything that's going on right now in the world. It's tempting to grab that $20, but when you have a problem, you want it resolved. And internet's really important to our members now. And I'll tell you, when you have a problem with us, you have access to us immediately, and we're going to fix any problem you have within a day. That's not going to be what you're going to deal with AT&T or Spectrum or other providers. But we're going to be there to support you, Johnny on the spot. And so please consider using us if you're not, but stay with us if you are. The last thing I'll bring up, and I mentioned it in real brief on my intro, is our podcast. We have started that process. The first two issues are me and our podcast leader, John Davis, talking about different issues, sort of similar to what we've talked about today. But a lot more coming there. Every 2 months, we're going to be putting out a new issue. So if you haven't had a chance to listen in, please do so. But now I'm going to shift to our Q&A period. So Dirk, you want to go ahead and lead that?
Yes, sir. Happy to do that. A quick reminder for everybody that's online with us. If you're taking part online, you'll find a place to submit your name and question right below the streaming player. Again, if you're online with us, during this event, go ahead and give us your name and your question. Submit that, and we'll get that into the conversation. If you're on the phone with us for this live event, please press *3 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. Again, if you've got a question you'd like to ask, please press *3 to get involved in this conversation. And please keep in mind, we've got a lot of people on the line with us participating. As a courtesy, we're asking you to keep your questions brief so that we can get to and through as many as possible tonight. And so our first question comes from, we've got Tricia in Joshua joining us. Tricia, welcome to the call. What's on your mind?
Well, my original question was, are the rates going to rise? You answered that question. What I don't understand is why I can use the same amount or less, and my bill is so wildly different. Like last month, my bill was almost $3. This month, it was $150. We didn't do anything different. Why is that?
Yeah, so from your standpoint, you feel like you didn't do anything different, but you need to look at the kilowatt hours that you used. I guarantee you that is different. And so it's a challenge to understand that your HVAC system is pretty much automatic, and so it does its thing based on how you set it. And there's a lot of times there's things going on there that you don't recognize, but it's using energy to cool or heat, and every time that thing kicks on one way or another, it's using energy. And so, controlling that piece is the biggest part of your bill. The other thing, and it's important on the energy audit piece, so if you haven't had an energy audit, we find sometimes members call in and say, hey, there's no way I'm using this energy. Can you come do an energy audit? And we come out, and we actually find a water leak in the hot water system, and the hot water is just flowing somewhere under the slab or under the house. And ultimately, you're just constantly heating water, and your water heater never gets a break, and that adds thousands of kilowatt hours to your usage. And so we help our members with that too. So there's a lot of things that could be going on there, but we'd love to come to an energy audit and help you evaluate, basically what you're dealing with there.
All right, don't forget, if you've got a question, please press *3 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. Or if you're online enjoying this event, please just type your name and question right below the streaming player. Matter of fact, Taylor did that. He's online enjoying the event. And the question he submitted, if we have another extreme event, what would be different this time financially for members?
Yeah, that's a great question. So because we've gone through the extreme event, everybody's learned a lot through that process. Now that we're responsible for the power supply of our members, so that energy portion, which is the biggest part of your bill, our board of directors is very concerned that we never see that happen again as far as the negative result we saw last time. Now, we didn't have control over what happened at the Brazos level, but it did happen. And so because we saw it happen, we're very careful to manage the risk going forward of that energy part of your bill to ensure that we don't end up in a similar situation again. And so I can't say never, ever, ever, but we're doing a lot now to ensure that we mitigate against those really extreme risks that we saw back then. And so I'm pretty confident that you're not going to see something like that happen again because we're doing the things necessary to manage that risk. It's a good question.
All right, it's time to hear from Andrew. Welcome, Andrew, to the call from Granbury. What is your question,
hello,
sir?
Yes, hello. My question was relating to the forecast for the increase in power generation over the next 5 years, going from 85 gigawatts to 400, largely associated with large loads, data centers, and the like. My question is, how are we ensured, or are we, that the cost of connecting those large loads will not be passed on to the ratepayers?
That's an excellent question, and I appreciate you asking it. So in the state of Texas right now, and I mentioned it a little bit in the discussion a bit ago, ERCOT and the PUC are developing rules, and a lot of those rules have to do with how the interconnection process works of these large loads to the system. And there is a great desire by the state, by the PUC, and by all those parties that are involved to ensure that as these loads connect to the grid, that those costs are not borne by the general consumer. And so there's an expectation of all of these larger loads, whether it be data centers or manufacturing facilities, et cetera, that they are going to pay their interconnection costs. And so when they do connect, and the costs are pretty extreme, so they really do need to pay their own costs, because if they don't, it will get shared in the state. We haven't seen the final rules complete yet. I think I mentioned earlier that those are due out in June. But there is a tremendous amount of discussion to ensure that rules are included to keep general consumers as a whole during this time, and not shift costs from the data centers to them. And you've probably seen from a national perspective as well, even the current administration in D.C. have spent some time talking about this issue as well. And most of the large data center providers have signed on to a national basically plan that says they are going to pay their fair share and pay their way of interconnecting to the system. And so they understand that too as an industry, that they're going to have to pay their interconnection costs and any increases in the transmission system that are required to connect them. And so we just have to make sure the rules say that. At United, we don't have a whole lot to do with that. We do give our comments to the PUC as well as other industry stakeholders as to whether we think that the rules are appropriate. But our whole goal is to ensure that our members aren't taking, number one, additional financial responsibility for those loads that connect. But number two, we want to make sure that our members don't have any more risk associated with serving those loads either. So I will say that, but let me add a little bit more color to, if data centers do connect to the distribution system, if you don't allow me, because I think it's important for our members to understand there are some potential benefits to data centers being served by your co-op. The first of which is our securitization charge that we have to pay. Is we basically annually have to pay fixed bond payments to the bondholders of that debt that we borrowed to pay those costs. Because of that, and I mentioned earlier, the more cells that we have, those costs get spread over more cells. So we actually did a study on a 1 gigawatt data center connecting to our system and what that would mean for the securitization cost. And the calculation is right now it's about a penny per kilowatt hour that gets added to your bill for that securitization cost. That would go down to 0.1 cents per kilowatt hour if we serve that 1 gigawatt data center. So it basically takes the majority of the securitization cost off your bill, which would be a great benefit to our members. It would save you about 8% monthly on your bill over what you're paying today. So that would be a benefit that they bring to the table. The second benefit, any new member that connects to the cooperative is responsible to produce some amount of margin for the cooperative. And as I discussed earlier, that margin goes back to our members over time. But that would not be any different for the data center. And because they're using so much more energy, they would also be providing margin into your cooperative. When we have sufficient margins, we do not have to do rate increases on the distribution component of your bill. So that 25% that we have to pay attention to, right now we're projecting with the rates that we have today that that's going to get us to about 2030 without additional rate increase on that 25% of your bill, which is good. But ultimately, if we get additional margins from data centers, there's a chance that 2030 projected rate increase will actually go out to some point in the future, and that will depend on how many data centers actually connect with us. And so that's another benefit of them coming and connecting to our system. But obviously, we have to do it in a responsible way across the state to make sure we take care of reliability and costs and those concerns that you brought up. And I'll tell you, the state is very concerned about what you brought up. And so there's a lot of effort being put into from our legislative side to our regulatory side in Texas to do everything we can to ensure that data centers and other large loads are paying their fair share when they connect to the system. So thank you for that question. A really long answer, but I wanted to give you all some detail on that situation.
So we have Cameron Smallwood answering your questions. If you have a question in your mind you'd like to ask, please press *3 on your telephone keypad, or if you're following along online, go ahead and type your name and question right below the streaming player. Off to Johnson County now. We've got Ron joining us. Hi, Ron. Welcome to the call. What's your question?
Yes. First of all, I'd like to say, as far as electrical reliability and internet reliability, y'all are fantastic. Couldn't complain. You mentioned that over the next 5 to 7 years, our load is going to increase 5 times. Can you tell us anything about where this additional power generation? Because as we know, our electrical market is supply and demand. And if our demand is going up 5 times, where is our supply going to come from?
That's a really great question. I think that, when I brought up the 5 times growth in demand across the state, the question is that real? And I think that if you read any of the articles that are out there in media right now on this issue, there is definitely some discussion around whether that's actually a real number or not. And our view is that it's not a real number. Our view is that it's going to be something less than that. But we do think that there is going to be growth. And is it going to be double? I think that's something that's potentially likely in the next 5 years if this data center thing happens and the large load manufacturing complexes, industrial complexes do site in Texas as they plan. And even at that, Ron, I think there's still a challenge because generation has to come. And right now where we sit today, we don't have enough generation to support that kind of growth in the state of Texas. Now, with that said, generators are lining up right now and seeing that the need is going to be there as we go forward. The question is, how quickly can those get built, and what does that look like going forward? Solar does continue to get built in Texas, as well as a new topic, if you will, of generation, and that's batteries. And there's been multi-gigawatts of batteries that have been actually deployed in ERCOT now. They're not long duration generators, so to speak. They deploy in 4 to 6 hour increments kind of deal, and then they have to be recharged. But they haven't really changed the dynamic of the grid. But when all of these loads hit, let's say it doubles over the next 5 years, batteries don't fix that problem. It's going to take natural gas generation, and we're all watching to see what that looks like right now. But there are a number of natural gas generation companies that have made announcements that they're going to be adding generation to the grid to support this growth. So time will tell. We're not sure exactly what that's going to look like. Obviously, we don't at United own generation, and nor will we own generation. That's not anything that we plan to do. So we're going to be watching what happens in the market. But I mentioned earlier that 53% of the cost that we have that's energy only on your bill. I told you I think we can get short term that cost down, but I also told you that longer term in that 5 to 7 year window, as these data centers such come online, I think there's going to be some stress in pricing in the market because I'm not sure there's going to be enough generation to cover all that with the gaps that we have today. So that's our challenge ahead. I'm glad you asked the question. I think reality is going to set in, but you are going to see some growth that's still pretty amazing. It's just not going to be 4 or 5 times like they're saying could happen.
So next up, we've got Jackie from Lakeside Village with a question. Jackie, what's on your mind?
I read that you were not allowed to expand all of your internet service into some of the areas you wanted to, and that we've been assigned to somebody else. Does that include Lakeside Village, that we won't get our internet through United?
Yes, ma'am, that's a really good question, and so let me sort of explain the situation, but you summarized it really well. So we've, as I mentioned a bit ago, we've served the majority of our members, but not all. And so there are segments, including Lakeside Village, that we haven't built out yet. We did apply for some federal funding called BEAD, B-E-A-D, and you can, if anybody wants to research that online, you can. We did apply for that funding. We felt pretty good about it going into the process, but we did not end up winning it. And that what that means for the co-op is for us to build those last segments of our network. It would actually be financially problematic for your co-op to do that without the assistance of grant funding. And so because of that, and the fact that the federal government is going to fund a different provider to serve those last few areas, we can't really do it. So you're correct, and you've read everything exactly like we put out, and so your summary is good on that. Now, let me talk about what that means going forward. We're not going to leave you high and dry. We're paying really close attention to what's going on there. And NextLink is the company that has gotten that money. For the most part, there's a small pocket that's Starlink, but most of it's NextLink. And so NextLink has made the commitment that they're going to serve the high-speed internet in those last few areas, and they're going to do that within a 2-year time frame as to when they sign the contract. And the contract's supposed to be signed any day now, and then they'll have the obligation to do it. And so they're going to be required by the contract they signed to actually provide those remaining areas high-speed internet. And so to the extent that they don't do that, we're going to be right there with you to ensure that we make sure everybody that needs to know knows that they haven't met their obligation that they've contracted to do. So we're going to be helping our members to make sure that happens. Now, I'll say they're planning to do it with wireless technologies, and that's going to be a challenge, I believe, in some of those areas for them to do that, but they've obligated to do it as they go forward, and we'll help hold them accountable for that. If there are areas that we can add some fiber in the future, and it makes financial sense for us to do so, we're going to continue to watch that and look at it. There may be other grant programs that come out in the future that want to extend fiber. And in those cases, we'll be right there looking at those opportunities. But today, there are no new opportunities for grant funding where we sit right now.
Again, if you've got a question on your mind, we would love to hear from you. Please press *3 on your telephone keypad. And matter of fact, let's get up to Mansfield. We've got Patrick joining us now. Patrick, you're live with Cameron Smallwood. What's your question?
Thank you, Cameron. My one question, the energy audit, is it free for the members? And the next question is internet. Has it already expanded to Mansfield area?
Okay, great questions. So the energy audit, yes, is free. It's included in our normal cost of service to you, and we have a number of experts that do that. And so yes, please call in and schedule that. We'll get out there and help you and review. The second answer to your question, in Mansfield, it depends on where you're at. And so in some areas where there were multiple providers already in subdivisions, et cetera, we chose not to build into those areas. And so if members already had access to high speed, let's say Spectrum and somebody else, we didn't feel like it was a good use of our members' money to expand in those areas. So you might be, because Mansfield has quite a bit of service already. That was where a lot of our members already had access to high-speed internet, and so we didn't build much of Mansfield out. But you can call in and find out if we built into where you're at up there, and we can give you the answer.
All right, we've got Wendell participating online. He sent a note and says, usually you have a comparison table of UCS rates compared to other providers. Why is that comparison not available?
I'm not sure where you're looking at because it is available and we publish it every month. It's on our website and it's also in our magazine. And so the magazine goes to every member unless you've opted out, which just only a handful of people have opted out of the magazine. So most everybody gets the magazine. But if you don't see it in the magazine, it's also on our website and we update it every month. So we're very transparent about our costs. The rate estimates are not estimates, the rate calculations are always available for you. And you'll see if you look over time, look at it every month, we're very, very in the market, a lot of times cheaper than everybody else. So it just depends on the month because rates move around all the time, but we're always very, very competitive.
All right, moving on, back to the phones we go. And we've got Stephen joining us. Hi, Stephen. You are live on the call. What's your question for Cameron?
Yes, sir. My question is, I own multiple electric vehicles, and it would be a great benefit to have the option to have a variable rate plan so that I could charge my vehicle overnight at a cheaper rate. Is that ever going to be a possibility?
So today we do have a time of use rate plan that you can call in and have a discussion with our office and see if that would be advantageous with you. But I can tell you members that have tried to use that haven't done so very successfully. It hasn't really saved them much money. We are looking at the potential of creating EV rate plans in the future, but we haven't done one specifically for that yet because we just don't have that many members that have the EVs. But it is something that we're looking forward to evaluating as we go forward. So yeah, stay tuned on that. But if you want to understand our time of use rate, we'd be glad to explain how that works to you, and that might be advantageous to you if you can control the periods that you're charging in.
Just looking at the clock, looks like we have time for one more question, and that honor goes to Todd in Granbury. Todd, you're live on the call. Go ahead with your question, sir.
Hi, thank you very much. I believe that the gentleman earlier had a similar question regarding the data center needs on electricity and whether or not the supply and demand might increase our rates drastically in the future. So I think that question's already been answered.
Okay. Well, I appreciate you calling in and listening to our session today. So, Dirk, I guess that was the last question. We're wrapping up at the 5 o'clock hour, and so that was sort of our time frame for today. That doesn't have to stop the conversation. We obviously have a number of questions that we haven't been able to respond to. We'll be getting back with those members that have left those questions for us to answer. We'll reach back out to you and answer those things. I think we've answered actually most of them. I'm looking at the screen, and the majority of them have been answered with the different questions that have been asked. So, most of all, I just want to say I appreciate you as members being engaged with your electric cooperative. It means a lot to us to have an engaged membership, and I hope you see that we're very transparent in all that we do here at your co-op, and really appreciate your participation today. So I hope you all have a wonderful evening and a blessed time ahead. So God bless all of you.